better than being up in Pennsylvania right now because they got a cold front coming through right now, and it doesn't look too good. But it's I've been down here quite a few times over the years. I have a friend actually has a restaurant over in South Beach, a family in the area, so I got to know Miami quite a bit over the last 10 to 15 years here. Always enjoyed coming down here. And when somebody brought up the idea about the Miami Book Fair, I said, yeah, let's take a look at this. As I said, we got this book that we came out with at the end of September down here at the White House. It was a 2.5 year work to get this thing to publication here, but it finally came out on September 24th. And what we did was talk about my time starting in Lancaster, Pennsylvania, going through my culinary experiences, going over to Europe. I spent 2.5 years in France, a year or so down in the Virgin Islands in St. Croix. And then when I was heading back up north, I landed in D.C. and back in '87. And I found work fairly quickly, and in D.C. that is, and started my work experience there. And 3 years later, I had the opportunity to work at the White House. And during that time, I started with Bush Sr., went through 8 years with Clinton, and 4 or 5 years with George W. Bush from 1992 through 2005. So out of all these things and all the menus that we used to have to produce there, that was my biggest challenge there. When you cook for the same people every day, you need different menus. So we were constantly looking for different ideals, how to cut that lamb chop a little bit different, how to cut a vegetable a little bit different, plate presentation. It's a very, very challenging part of what we had to do at the White House. And if you would look at all the menu cards that we produced there, and I saved over 400 of them, and in the back of the book, when we recreated our recipe area, we took them from official menus that we did at the White House. And I probably saved about 450 of these cards here. And if you look at every one of them, every one's different. There's no ditto throughout the whole crowd there. So when we go through and do items, a lot of times we do something like we're doing today is the chanterelle mushroom soup. I cooked it one time for them as an official meal, and then that was it. Where I got the inspiration for it was I was over in Germany visiting a friend of mine near Wiesbaden, and we were right on the Rhine River, and we went to this restaurant. It was in the middle of summer, and they had chanterelle mushroom soup on the menu. I tasted it, and I went crazy. I could not wait to get back to France to go visit some other friends of mine. I found chanterelle mushrooms and immediately made a recipe out of it. And that following December for our holiday menu, I used it for the first course of our holiday menu. So and then the other reason why I chose it for this time here, I wanted to do something a little bit different, maybe a little bit exotic for some folks here, but it's also seasonal. This right now is right in the middle of the great season for chanterelle mushrooms. I'm not sure if you can go to a Whole Foods around here or any other markets where you can find chanterelles, but they're very abundant right now. And the price is not that bad. When you get early in the season, late in the season, they can be a little more pricier. But right now, these are not too bad. These were actually flown in from Washington State. They're hand-picked. When we get them in, we have to make sure that we clean them really good. You even see here, there's like pine needles all through there from being on the floor of the forest there. It is one of my favorite mushrooms just for sauteing on itself there. You want to make sure that they're a little bit on the dry side. Here's another one here. These pine needles are all over. If they seem a little dirty, like earlier I had a bowl of cold water. I kind of dipped it through the water, kind of loosening up the dirt a little bit and wash it by hand. You don't want to set it in water and let it soak in there because these are like sponges. They're going to absorb the water and it's going to take away from the quality of the mushroom. So this is what a nice chanterelle looks like. And what I did was I took them and I then just peeled them apart, pretty much like this. You can just break them apart like this and into pieces like this. And at this point here, you could just saute them with some whole butter, maybe throw a couple of minced shallots in there and a little salt and pepper, and you're just good with just plain old sauteed mushrooms. But what I'm doing here today is breaking them into strips like this here, and then we're going to cut them down to just like a small dice. And it doesn't have to be real pretty because what we're doing is we're going to saute these up, and then we're going to put them in the blender here to puree the soup. So everything's going to turn into one there. And the final product is going to look just like that here. And keep on stirring that. So as we go through, we're going to just cut these guys up here. And it's real important to have a little bit of knife skills here, but don't feel it's necessary to go really quickly here. You can always make sure they go a little slower, and it's always important to also have a very sharp knife. Actually, most people will cut themselves more with a dull knife than they would actually a sharp knife. because you're putting more weight into it and leaning into it. Sometimes the vegetable rolls over or the piece of meat there, and then you're in a little bit of trouble there. Actually, all the presidents and the first ladies, they like mushroom soup. Even if I made with shiitake mushrooms, white mushroom, or cremini mushrooms, it was something that we would use on a regular basis for day-to-day meals. Because we had basically two types of cooking we did at the White House. It was a home. They lived there. So we took care of breakfast, lunch, and dinner, and all for their family and their guests who are inside the White House themselves. And then the other part is we're basically like a banquet house. State dinners, breakfasts, lunches, dinners, receptions, barbecues on the South grounds. All these things were under our care also. So one day I might be just cooking for 2 people, President First Lady, and next day I have all of Congress on the South grounds doing a picnic for 2,000 folks. And it can be a challenge. And our kitchen was not that big. A lot of people would walk into it and they go, my goodness, is this it? When I'm working by myself, and there's only 5 chefs in the kitchen. 2 were in pastry, and 2 were in pastry and 3 were in cooking. And then we would help with other events that we would bring other chefs in the area, and they would kind of work for like a day's wages, basically. And they were local chefs that we knew. They would come and help us out when we had larger events. But basically, you were by yourself. What we're going to do is, let me see how hot this is here. All right. Under a medium-low temperature, we are going to do something with these leeks here. We cut these in half. We wash them under the water, because I don't know if you're familiar with leeks or not. A lot of times inside the layers, there's a lot of sand and dirt. So it's important to wash them very well. And then afterwards, we cut them in long strips, and then we dice them. And what we're going to do under a medium-low temperature here is something referred to as sweating. We're going to sweat these leeks and cook them down for a little bit. And we do not want any color. No browning of the onions or the garlic or any of the things here. Just slowly sweat. And what sweat means is that you're taking and cooking it slowly, that you're actually cooking the liquid out of the vegetable. And so that steam that comes out from it is like you see right here, that's sweating. You're sweating the vegetable to get the extra moisture out of it, and you're actually concentrating the flavor of the leek in this case, and the other vegetables that we're going to be putting here, and the herbs. So these are sweating down nicely. See, you just says steam coming out. It's sweating right now. And there's no colorization. You can see that quite well. I'm going to put just a little bit of, I got kosher salt here today. I like cooking with kosher salt and sea salt for the most part. I don't use the Morton's iodized salt. I don't care for that. It has like a little bitter aftertaste to it. Some fresh ground pepper. Cook that into the leeks for just a moment or so here. And then before we put the mushrooms in, we want to take the garlic. Let's see. Put it all in there. What the heck? Garlic's good. We got that done. So butter, leeks. I like using whole butter for that. I mean, if you're a vegetarian, obviously using like olive oil or something like that is perfectly fine. But something about the butter when it's whole, and you wouldn't even want to use something referred to as clarified butter. You want to be able to use a whole butter. It absorbs into the vegetable and gives just a nice flavor to it. All right, that's sweating down good. I'm going to take some fresh thyme that we picked. If you know or not, this is fresh thyme here. And what we do is we take these pieces like this, and the leaves are pointing this direction, and you pull back against it, and they come right off. And you just have the leaves there, and we just chop them up for what we're using for this for right now. All right, so we're just put that in there, let that saute for a moment or two. You want to saute garlic, but there again, too, we don't want to brown it. Browning garlic kind of gets a little bit of a bitter flavor to it. All right, next we got our chanterelle mushrooms. Put those guys in here. All right, there again, too. Medium-low heat. That's almost sounding like it's getting a little too high. So now we're going to just let that sweat down for a little bit here. All right, let that cook down, let that sweat for a little bit. Like I said earlier, it's important to have all these great ingredients of good leeks and chanterelle mushrooms, what have you. But the other thing that's real important is your stock. We use chicken stock with this recipe. I like the flavor of chicken stock. Chicken stock goes very well with not just chanterelle mushroom soup, but other vegetable soups, and actually brings out the flavor of everything a little bit better than using other stocks. But there again, too, if you're a vegetarian and you wanted to use olive oil and then use the vegetable stock, that's perfectly fine also. But there's something about fresh made chicken stock, and not from the box, or definitely not using the bouillon cubes. I mean, you got to do what you got to do here. But on my side, I'm making chicken stock every single week in my kitchens. It's the most made stock that I use on a regular basis. And in the French cooking, they refer to this as a fond blanc. A fond blanc means foundation white. And the word foundation is in there because this is the foundation of cooking. Having a good stock to make your sauces, make your soups, is real important. And then you have other things like veal stock that makes like demi-glace and things of that nature. It's referred to me as, I like to call it liquid gold because it's so good. And when it's done correctly, you make some fabulous sauces with it. Turn that up just a little bit here. Even living down here in the hot region here, how many people like soups? I mean, soups are great. You know, it feeds the soul. You know, even grandma's chicken soup. You know, taking the whole chicken and boiling it up with some carrots, celery, onions, and herbs and aromatics. It's just wonderful. And after you take that chicken out and you take the meat off the carcass and put the carcass back in that stock and cook it for a little while, it's just wonderful. And it really does. I really believe that makes you feel better if you're feeling a little bit under the weather. Sweat. See all the steam coming out? We're sweating. We're cooking out the moisture. I mean, a mushroom is like 95% moisture. And so by cooking out the moisture, you're concentrating the flavors of the mushroom, and it's going to give you a little bit better end result. And the moisture that we'll put back into it, obviously, will be the chicken stock. And actually, in the book here, one of the recipes I have there is an artichoke and leek soup. And that flavor of that artichoke going through, it's basically the same pattern of what we just did here. I used the leeks and the butter. I used a little bit of garlic. I don't think I used any thyme on that one there. And then have the bottom, fresh artichoke bottoms, whittled down, cut up, and then sweating down just what we're doing right now here, and then adding our chicken stock. It's very, very flavorful. And so I try to pick out all these different recipes that had big, big flavors to it. I can put just a little bit more salt in there. Season it up a little bit. And remember, we're using chicken stock that's just been boiled and has no salt in it. So it's important to make sure you season everything. Obviously, if you have health conditions, you have to be careful of how much salt you're going to use, but you have to season it well because there's no salt from the base or from some of the canned chicken stocks have a lot of sodium in there. So you have to be very careful if you are going to use them that they're not already too salty. All right, so we have just a little bit of flour that we're going to call, in French they refer to as singère. Your singère, the flour over top of our vegetable, just a light sprinkle. We're just going to incorporate that all together. And once the flour's been incorporated, then if I need to add a little bit more, then I just sprinkle a little bit more on there. You don't want to dump it all on there, and when you start to mix, you get like a roux ball. You know, you want to be able to absorb into the liquid and the butter that's inside the pan here. And we are just about there. Okay, so that one's done. So after that's been put together here, we will add our chicken stock immediately. Stir this up here, and we're going to let this come back to a simmer. Ask to boil for maybe about 5-10 minutes or so. Two things happen. Obviously, you're going to marry all those flavors together that we put in there for the herbs and the leeks and the mushrooms and the garlic. But also it has to boil so that the reason why I put the flour in there is just to give it a little bit of body. And the starch will not take effect if the liquid doesn't come to a boil. Same thing like with cornstarch and things like that. It has to come to a boil for the starch molecules to absorb the liquid. So that's all going like that. Most of the time at the White House, we, for all official dinners, we would start off, obviously a couple of past hors d'oeuvres, but we'd start off like a 4-course meal. have like a fish dish, and then do a meat dish, and then do a salad, cheese dish, and then also dessert. And that kind of got set up back to when JFK was in the office. Jacqueline Kennedy had a lot of large French influence in the kitchen there with the French chef who actually just passed away about a year or so ago. I got to know him a little bit. His name was Rene, and they started that format, and I believe they're still doing it today here. They did platter service quite a bit there also, where they wanted to kind of give the feel of a home. So every table of 10, they would have 11 portions on a platter, and they would present it to the host of the table. And the host of the table is somebody who's been there before and knew the system and would start serving themselves. And a lot of times you go to hotels where there's platter service, the server is serving it to you. But here you would serve yourself. And it's pretty intimidating if you haven't done that before. So that's why they would always go to the host of the table, and the host of the table would always be somebody who has been there before and eaten and dined there and understood what the system was. And then obviously having the meat dish and then having the salad cheese course afterwards was very customary of like European dining. When I was in France, a lot of times you eat the salad after the main course because salad has a lot of moisture in it, and they feel that that kind of helps and aids in digestion. So instead of starting the meal off with a salad, they like to end it with a salad. And a lot of times it's just basic greens with a simple mustard shallot vinaigrette, which is very basic, very good. A real French dressing isn't pink, that stuff at the salad bar. It's red wine vinegar, minced shallots, minced garlic, good Dijon mustard, and not the Grey Poupon stuff either. That's too sweet. You got to get a good Dijon mustard, and then whip it in with some olive oil, and then some fresh ground pepper and salt. It's so simple, but it's so good. That good Dijon mustard with the red wine vinegar, shallots, garlic, and then the extra virgin olive oil makes a fantastic dressing. And it's my go-to dressing when I go and do all the things I do out there. But that's what you do. It's all about the ingredients. Is what you're seeing here, where you're talking about the corn there or the sole. It's finding the good ingredients. And if you have good ingredients, more than likely you're set up to have a good meal. Obviously, you have to learn a few cooking skills here, but you definitely have to at least start with some good ingredients here. We're going to take these ingredients here and put them into this blender right now. Blenders are dangerous, and they're all different. So if you're going to do something like this with something that's hot, you have to be very careful. I always like to take a clean towel, put it over top here. And this particular one I have not used before, so I had to do a little learning curve on it. If I get it turned on first here. But I push down on this thing here, and I want to start off on a low speed here. And I just puree for just a moment. I do not like it to be in there too long. I don't want it looking like baby food, but I want to have a little bit of texture to it. So I want a little bit chunky, but I do want to grind up those the shallots. The leeks and the mushrooms, and just kind of you get a little more flavor out of all that. I got a little bit of cream. Start with that to begin with. We're going to stir this. Looks like just a wee bit more clean. Turn the temperature up a little bit on that. I want to simmer for maybe 5 or 10 minutes, And like a lot of you might already know about soups. I mean, it's great to be able to cook this right now and serve it, but it definitely always tastes better the next day. There's something about when it sits, like all those flavors really marry together, and it always tastes better the next day. It's there. It's a little bit chunky. I have a little bit of texture to it all. All right. Turn this up just a hair too. And does anybody have any questions at this point in time? And she was asking what happens if they want something to eat like late at night after we serve dinner. And on the second floor kitchen is their area, and on the ground floor kitchen is our area that we would cook and do our major preparation and our hard cooking. And then I would take it to the elevator, go up to the second floor, and go into the small kitchen and just kind of set things up and do final cooking and plate presentation, give it to the butler, go through a swinging door, and you're right there in the next room over. In fact, if you look at the Pennsylvania Avenue, from Pennsylvania Avenue, you look at the White House, you got the first floor is like the state dining room, the blue room, the green room, and all that. The second floor, on the far right window, is the kitchen I would work in when we're upstairs serving the family. And the next two windows is their dining room. So that corner of the house is where I stayed most of the time when I was up there. Of course, they would always come back, interject from time to time, or look for a bottle of water out of the refrigerator. But inside that refrigerator, too, we keep some snacks around or maybe some leftovers. They might say, hey, that soup is really good. Why don't you put it in a cup and throw it in the refrigerator and keep it handy? And once in a while, they might have a little something, but it might be more like some pretzels or something like that, or some snack stuff. George W. Bush brought a recipe in for some Chex Mix from the governor's mansion. And we used to make this stuff up there and had pistachios and some of the Czech stuff and a lot of Tabasco and whatever in it. And he kind of liked that for like a little bit of a snack. So we used to keep that up there and keep a couple cookies and stuff like that. But for the most part, when they have dinner, it's usually like 3 courses. They have like a first course, an entree, and then a dessert. So they're in pretty good shape afterwards. So for the most part, we didn't get those crazy calls middle of the night. What would happen is I would leave the second floor when it looks like they're done eating. I'd go downstairs, start cleaning up, and then I'd always call up to the second floor butler pantry and say, what's going on? They say, they're gone. And that would be the okay to leave then. And then we'd finish cleaning up the place and go from there. But sometimes things do happen. And I'll just finish the point. I'll get to your role next. It was about 2003 or so. President and First Lady went up to Camp David. And if they go to Camp David, the Navy takes care of all their food needs. They maintain all of the cabins up there, and so we have nothing to do with it. If the President and First Lady are entertaining a head of state up at Camp David, then we would usually treat it like a catering thing where we would make all the stuff down at the White House, take it up to Camp David, and then produce the food and the meals that are needed. And sometimes it might be 2 days worth of foods that we might be up there staying overnight. I've always liked going up to Camp David. It's kind of cool. You don't really know what it's about. You don't see any photographs on what goes on up there. So I was lucky enough to be one of the chefs that always got asked to go up there, and I never turned it down. I always liked going up to Camp David. So this one weekend, they went to Camp David. If they go there for the weekend by themselves, they leave 3, 4 o'clock on a Friday afternoon. They come back 2 o'clock on Sunday afternoon. We hear nothing. So this one weekend, it was about 9:30 on a Saturday morning. My younger son was in second grade, and he was playing basketball with the local kids, running up and down the court there and stuff. My cell phone rings, and it's somebody from the usher's office. The usher's office is like the nerve center of the White House, and they're there pretty much from 6 in the morning until about 11 o'clock at night if the president's not in, just maintaining in case something pops up. And unfortunately, that morning, he called me up and said, John, the president's coming back at 11:30, and they're 6 for lunch. Click. That's it. And I was like, oh my goodness. I mean, that never happens. I was like, so I immediately grabbed my son. I actually had another mom that I had carpooled with. And I said, hey, Maria, come or go. I said, I got to roll. I don't know what's going on, but I got to leave. She said, I'm ready. So she jumped in the car. We went back to the neighborhood, dropped her off. But the second I got in my car, I turned on the radio. I heard what happened. It was Space Shuttle Columbia. It crashed on reentry. And he needed to get back ASAP, So by the time I got to my house, dropped off everybody, and I was probably in the car heading down to the White House about 10:20, 10:25. I got an hour and 10 minutes to make lunch for 6 people. So I'm going down 270, and I call the engineers who are there 24/7, maintaining all the mechanics of the house. And I called them up. I said, get up in my kitchen, turn the ovens on, turn the fryer on, turn the grill on, put a pot of water to boil. What are you going to do with it? I said, I don't know. Just get it on. Get everything hot, We can send some of these soups out. You guys ready to work with me here? We will ladle these guys out, send them around. Everybody ready for some soup there? Excellent. Let's see how thick this is. It looks pretty good. Let's fill it about there, okay? All right. And so, obviously, we had good days and bad days at the White House. Now, not those bad days, but obviously one of them was 9/11. And a lot of people don't realize or didn't realize that actually that congressional picnic was on 9/11. We were supposed to serve all Congress on the south grounds of the White House on 9/11. So we were in full production mode that day. And when the word came down that a plane had hit one of the Twin Towers, I think like a lot of us thought it was probably like a little Cessna or something like that. And I couldn't just walk away from what I was doing. We were in full production doing what we needed to get done for that dinner. And we had 2,000 people coming to the White House that afternoon, all of Congress and their guests. So after I finished doing what I was doing on the stove, I went over to the storeroom. Storeroom, they had a small TV. I figured that's probably on. And I always remember I walked down and I stepped into the room. I looked up on the left, and that's where the TV up on the shelf. And I see smoke coming out of a building, and I see a plane going in. And I go to the guys, how do you get a picture of the building burning before the plane hit. And they were just sitting there going, I don't know, I think that's another plane. And I think I walked up just at that moment when that second plane hit. And so we're trying to figure out what that was all about. And then the chief usher of the White House is like the general manager. He came up behind me and said, John, there's no party tonight. This looks like a terrorist attack. Let's break everything down. Let's get all the food secure and let's get everybody out of here that's not a pass holder. So let's get back to the original five of us. And we probably had about 15, 20 people working all throughout the house there, helping us get things ready. And we were in the main kitchen. I was in there doing main production. The chef was on the south grounds, getting things set up. So they started breaking things down, and it wasn't a panic or anything at that point in time. We were just getting everything broken down. I decided to turn over to being family. I was family that week, and family means that anything goes on for lunch and dinner is you're responsible for. So I started making a minestrone soup for Mrs. Bush for lunch, and a composed salad. And as I was getting that together, our head chef came running into the kitchen because I heard nothing that was going on outside. We're pretty insulated inside the house there, but the chef came running in, and he was high stepping it, and he was out of breath. He came running from the south grounds, full speed, and said that the Pentagon just got hit. We could be next. Everybody out of here. And he was able to hear and see the explosion from the south grounds, which you can kind of see the Pentagon somewhat, but you can definitely see the explosion and the smoke that was coming up. And so we just stopped what we were doing. I went over, I turned the stove off to make sure we're not going to burn anything too there, but we just started leaving the White House. And I left just like this, had my jackets on, the maids and the butlers, they all had their uniforms on, and we left underneath the north portico. We headed over towards the northwest gate, and as I was walking in front of the Oval Office, I looked over the entrance of the Oval Office, and as you remembered, it was an absolutely beautiful day, crystal clear, and a perfectly blue sky there. And I just remember seeing all this black smoke swirling up in the sky, up above the pristine White House, the west wing of it. And I was like, wow, I mean, is that the Pentagon burning? I mean, it was pretty devastating to see how black that smoke was against the blue sky. But we finally got out to Pennsylvania Avenue. After maybe 15 minutes or so, the Secret Service came over and pushed us out of Pennsylvania Avenue, said get into Lafayette Park. After Lafayette Park, they pushed us across 8th Street. They kept pushing the perimeter further and further away there, And actually, another bizarre thing happened when we were in Lafayette Park. We heard jet engines coming in hard. I mean, it was like really loud, and you could hear the engines just grinding really hard, and everybody's head just like went like this to look up to the trees, and that jetliner went right over top of us, but it was going up and away. You could see the nose; it was being diverted away from downtown, but we didn't know. We thought that maybe this might have been another thing that might be coming on, But fortunately, it did not happen. It was a plane that was being diverted away from National Airport, and eventually, after standing around outside for almost 2 hours, I took my apron off finally and threw it away and just went down to go try and make my way back home. I lived probably about 25 miles away up in Rockville, Maryland, is where I was living at the time. And as I made my way back to the house there, it was pretty crazy. The first metro stop I went to, actually, there was just a ton of people going down inside there. I was like, I'm not going underground with a bunch of people like that. I kept walking up to DuPont Circle. DuPont Circle, same thing. If you know anything about Washington, D.C. metro system, DuPont Circle has like the longest escalator in the whole United States, I think. It's huge, how deep it is down there, So I said, keep going. So I went and crossed over Rock Creek Park, going up Connecticut Avenue, went to Woodley Park and Zoo, and there's where I jumped on the train and made my way back to the house. I called up the wife. Unfortunately, too, it was my son's birthday. He's born 9/11. He was probably like 5 turning 6 that day, and so we were trying to process all that with the young kids and stuff like that. And in his wisdom, like 2-3 days later, he said to me, "Hey, Dad, why did so many people have to die on my birthday?" I was like, "God, where did that come from?" But we got through it all. The next day we got back down to the White House. Finally got hold of the chef there. We were trying to make phone calls on the cell phones. Everything was blocked. I mean, the circuits are so jammed that you couldn't get a call out on a cell for anything. But we did finally get in touch with the folks back inside the White House. They said, "Hey, we're open for business tomorrow. Let's get down here." So I took the train back down the next morning, the metro, and got down there by 6 o'clock in the morning. And then we started our first day post 9/11 there, and it was pretty devastating to see how it affected everything. I mean, our social calendar got wiped out. We did no more parties until Christmas. At Christmas time, finally, the First Lady said, we've been grieving. It's been tough, but we think this is a good time to make a segue to start to entertain again. And Christmas is a good time to start that. Another interesting point was that the next day when we were in there, the Park Service, who takes care of all the flowers and the trees and stuff there, they came through the White House kitchen around the outskirts of it to that service elevator to go upstairs, and they had potted trees on hand trucks, and they just kept coming through. And I finally saw one of the guys I knew and said, "What's going on with all the trees?" He said, "Why don't you come with me?" So jumped on the elevator, went upstairs, went out on the roof, and they covered the whole roof of the White House with potted trees. Camouflage. It stayed like that till almost Christmas time. About mid-December, they went and brought all those trees off the roof of the White House. And actually, a week or so later, talking to some of the Secret Service guys, they were saying that they thought that they had reason to believe that that plane actually went into the Pentagon was actually looking for us, because the way it came in and the way it went around, because it didn't just come up and hit the Pentagon. It came up, it went over the Pentagon, went around D.C., came back to the Potomac River, went back down the Potomac River, and then it actually landed in the parking lot of the Pentagon and slammed into the base of the building. It's how that particular one hit there. And so they were saying how difficult it is to see the White House up in the sky. It is kind of hard because everybody's kind of at the same level, which is a good thing. That's what L'Enfant designed back in the early 1800s. And but you start thinking about your mortality and what have you, and it was there's a lot to think about. Yeah, grief counselors come in to talk to us and what we're doing and everything. But the most bizarre thing happened. Have you heard about all those airplanes that flew into the airspace around the White House? I worked every single one of those. And the first one was a Sunday night. The president was eating by himself. The First Lady was on the road. If that's a situation, usually just one butler, one chef, and maybe one pot washer downstairs, and that's it. And with George W. Bush, if he eats at 7 o'clock, by 7:05, it's done. It's hit and run. He eats very quickly when he's by himself. So I go up there and I serve him at 7 o'clock. At 7:05, I'm cleaning up, getting ready to leave. And the butler's over bringing back a couple of plates that he had from the dining room. I walk by him to go to this little elevator, the service elevator there. And as I'm waiting for the elevator to come up, I could hear the butler over in the sink, and I could hear him clanging with a couple of the dishes, and the water's running, so it's making a little bit of noise. But I hear this voice that I've never really heard before, at a pitch I never heard before. And it said, also the butler I was working with, his name is Ramsey. And I heard the voice said, "Ramsey, there's an aircraft heading our way. Get down to the bomb shelter." And I hear this and I go, "What is that? I mean, was that the president?" And then I hear him shut the water off. And he came out of his it's just a small little pantry. He walked out this little mini hallway that goes around where the kitchen is and the elevator. And I'm standing in that little hallway, and I'm trying to figure out what that was all about. And he said, "Was that the president?" I said, "I don't know, but I think it was." He said, "Well, what did he say?" He said, "Well, if I heard him right, he said, there's an aircraft heading our way. Get down to the bomb shelter." And he said, "Well, what are you going to do?" I said, "I don't know about you. I'm going to the bomb shelter." By that time, the elevator comes up and it opens up. We both jump on, and it's just two of us up there. And the president probably didn't even know I was up there. He probably thought I was already gone. It's just Ramsey was up there. And so we're going down to the basement, is where obviously the bomb shelter is. And we get down to G floor, where at my kitchen, I hit it real quick. I said, "Geez, I got my pot washer." So I jump off and I yell over to, his name was Clarence. I said, "Clarence, get over here." I said, "What do you want?" I said, "Get over, get on the elevator." "Why? What's going on?" I said, "Get on the elevator, So I dragged him over and got him on and explained to him what was going on there. And then we dropped down to B. And I get off the elevator, and it's probably from me to where the young girl is here, where the big blast door. And the whole time I worked at the White House, 92 through 2001, I mean, those blast doors are probably about that thick. They remained open and didn't do anything. I mean, there was never a drill. Nobody ever had, like, this is what you do in case of emergency. Those doors just remained open all the time. And they've probably been open since probably the Trumans, when they actually put those things in there. And that door is going, it's shutting. And now we're standing there, and the door's almost shut, and there's no way I'm going to be able to dive through that thing, No Indiana Jones that morning, But we standing there for a moment, all three of us are there, and I'm thinking, next time I'm not stopping for the pot washer. I'm going straight down to there. So we turn around and go, "What do you think of doing?" I said, "Well, let's get out of here, So we jumped on the elevator, went back up to the ground floor, go out through the main kitchen, And as we went through the kitchen, then there's a Secret Service agent always sitting there at the doors that go underneath the north portico. And actually, right under North Portico is our area that our storage, our refrigerators right underneath the North Portico area and the storeroom. So I go out there. There's usually always one guy standing there. We turn the corner. There's like 4 guys standing there. And I go to push on the door to go through, and the guy stops me. Goes, "Lockdown. Nobody in, nobody out." I said, "Guys, just open the door." You know. He said, "No, lockdown. Nobody in, nobody out." I said, "You can't just open the door and just let us get out of here." He repeated himself one more time. "Lockdown. Nobody in, nobody out." I said, "God, you guys take an oath for this stuff, you know." I said, just let us out. He didn't, you know. And that was probably about the weirdest 15 minutes I stood waiting, thinking, you know, I mean, here, back of my head, I got President of the United States saying there's an aircraft heading our way, go down a bomb shelter, so I think something somewhat imminent is going to happen here. And I just stood there thinking, am I going to be evaporated here in any moment, you know? I kept thinking about how many stories got knocked out when the planes hit the Trade Center, and I take that and put it over top of the White House, and I was like, yeah, that's pretty much us. That's the whole thing there, you know. And after they finally opened it up and we were able to finally leave, we cleaned up and left out of there. That affected you a little bit, you know. It was a lot to think about, you know. So, and we are ground zero there, you know, and it wasn't the same place after we left there. I mean, if you would see how I came to the White House in '92 and what I did to show my pass, put my codes in, get into the house, and what it was like when I left there, it's 2 different worlds, you know. Every time something happened, we lose more of our freedom around the White House, and the perimeter got further and further. And, you know, it started with the Oklahoma City bombing when they wanted to close Pennsylvania Avenue. Oh, that was an absolute nightmare with the local officials. Nobody wanted to close it locally, but the Secret Service wanted to close it. And they battled it for 2 years, but they won and closed that off. And then you had that fool with the AK-47, if you remember back in the 90s, shot the front of the White House. That changed things, what goes on, you know. So unfortunately, that's the downside to all this terrorist activity there, you know. How's the soup? You like it? I'm hoping you like it. And those basics are what you do. I mean, so you don't have this. You have artichokes instead. That process here, always having like an onion or a leek. I like to flavor leeks. I think leeks have a great onion flavor, and it leans in very well for these type of soups, you know. But if you don't have leeks, if you have a sweet onion, that's fine too. Don't feel you have to drive 50 miles to go find a leek somewhere, you know. So be mindful of those things. And one thing I did do in the book was give chef notes, you know, because I know some of these menus are seasonal and you might not be able to get a hold of it, of some of the stuff there. Then here you can substitute this, you know. Don't get too transfixed thinking that this is the only way it can go, you know. But doing like a vegetable soup, you know, with this mushroom, or if it's a regular mushroom, or cremini, or a shiitake, or if it's butternut squash soup, you know, I take the butternut, I cut it in half, I bake them off in the oven, but I'm still cooking the leeks the same way in the butter. I might have some different herbs and stuff in there, but then I'm going to throw my puree on top of it, and then the chicken stock until you get the right consistency. That's the basic foundation. Those principles of cooking the onions and leeks or something like that in the butter and getting things started, you can use that as a starting point for a lot of other soups too. All right, well, about there. If you had any questions on the way out, I'm here. I know I'll be downstairs momentarily signing some books here. And thank you.
This program is brought to you by Miami Culinary Institute at Miami-Dade College. For more information about the schools and the culinarium program, please visit www.miamidadeculinary.com or call 305-237-3276.